How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? I am Basil Rathbone. I'm going to read you an interesting and oft neglected story. One day, many centuries ago, when man's language had sufficiently developed to permit him to reason, he probably asked himself, what is prophecy? Before he had the word for it, he had the idea for it. For prophecy has always existed. Since the origin of rational man, he has held some concept of the future. With the passage of time, he has attributed the shape of his future to a variety of sources: cults, sects, faith, religions, and philosophies. Almost without exception, it has been variously named nature, truth, light, love, or God, to cite but a few. Some men have dared to examine these forces beyond the realm of the human body, to look ahead to forces which determine or foretell that which lies beyond the common understanding. They have, in fact, looked into the future and have seen 1,000 years hence as accurately as they see the morning sun. The prophet has been feared, laughed at, shunned, ridiculed, tortured, and rewarded. By whatever name he was known, mystic, seer, soothsayer, oracle, prophet, he has been one holding some almost inexplicable power of spiritual far-sightedness. In periods of stress and danger, prophets have risen in every land to warn the people and the rulers of coming calamities. Their predictions have come down to us carved in symbols often difficult to decipher. They have been inscribed in the clay tablets of Chaldea and the hieroglyphics found in Egyptian temples and in pyramids. Prophecies have been found burned into hides and painted on parchment scrolls in ruins and caves in India and Palestine. We find them recorded in holy scriptures of all races and nations, from India's Gita, China's Golden Book of Tao, to the Talmud, the Bible, and the Quran. They all contain passages predicting the future of individuals and nations. Almost all great events in human history have been prophesied in advance, sometimes hundreds of years before they came to pass. The conquests of Alexander, the French Revolution, the campaigns of Napoleon, the discovery of America, the Civil War, both world wars, one and two, and their outcome. And here's something quite extraordinary. Even the prediction of the present alliance of Russia and China was made over 400 years ago. The fall of the Maginot Line and the sweep of the Nazi war machine were prophesied, as well as the rise to leadership of Franklin Roosevelt. The V-2 bombing of London, plus the disaster of Pearl Harbor, can be found in prophetic past. Prophecy is a kind of pre-feeling of future events. It is a spiritual seeing of events to come, which may be hundreds of years and thousands of miles removed in time and space. It makes us wonder about a man's free will in a universe guided by irresistible laws and stirred by tremendous events. In Africa, Europe, and America, archaeologists have discovered cave paintings of our ancestors' hunts and battles. Primitive, but amazingly realistic. Many of them are highly relevant in any inquiry into the significance of prophecy. Some scientists believe the cave paintings are merely a pictorial record of the caveman's life, but others with more sensitive and mystical minds speculate that these paintings may well represent man's earliest attempt at prophecy. In the way a voodoo priest may prophesy disease or control death through an image, so may the caveman have used the images of hunts and battles to prophesy and project into the future his victories and his successful hunts. Primitive tribes in Australia and Africa are still known to use the image prophecy, and spurred on by its promise, are known to be surprisingly successful. The early prophets made their predictions hundreds, even thousands of years before their fulfillment, and they did so with an amazing accuracy. There are Egyptian hieroglyphics which predicted subsequent floods and disasters. Assyrian clay tablets which foretold wars and destruction, the parchments of the ancient Talmud, the sacred book of the children of Israel, all bear testimony of the importance of prophecy in the development of man's cultural, economic, social, and religious life. The Old Testament relates Isaiah's amazing prophecy about the biblical world's most glamorous and awe-inspiring city, Babylon, the capital of the greatest kingdom and the seat of such exalted rulers as Hammurabi and Nebuchadnezzar. The artist's conception of that teeming and dazzling metropolis is magnificent. Yet one shudders in awe as he senses the emotion which must have inspired the prophet Isaiah's words, "And Babylon, the glory of the kingdoms, the beauty of Chaldee's excellency shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It shall never be inhabited, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. Neither shall the Arab pitch his tent there, nor shall the shepherds make their fold there." The prophecy which Isaiah made 124 years before it was fulfilled, and which is true to the letter even today. It lies in ruins. As the prophet foretold, Babylon has never been rebuilt. Neither do the Arabs nor the shepherds pitch their tent there, for they consider the city dead and cursed. In Jeremiah, the 3rd verse of chapter 30, the prophecy relates, "For lo, the days come, said the Lord, that I will bring again the captivity of my people Israel and Judah, said the Lord, and I will cause them to return to the land of their fathers, and they shall possess it." The prophet spoke when the 10 tribes of Israel were still in captivity in Babylon 2,515 years before the English troops under General Allenby entered Jerusalem by foot and opened the gates for the return of the children of Israel. Since then, it has been as if the 10 lost tribes had been gathered out of Russia, Romania, Hungary, Austria, Germany, France, and Spain, as the Jews streamed in ever-increasing numbers to their homeland, Israel. And so have been fulfilled the words of prophet Amos, who declared, "And they shall build the waste cities and inhabit them, and they shall make gardens and eat the fruit of them, and I will plant them upon their land." In these fear-filled, troublesome times, the children of Israel may well heed the final words of Amos' prophecy when he concluded, "And they shall no more be pulled up and out of their land, which I have given them, said the Lord." The great events of the New Testament, such as the coming of John the Baptist and the life and crucifixion of Jesus, have all been foretold in the Old Testament, and Jesus did come, as he said, to fulfill the law of the prophets. 500 years before it actually occurred, Zechariah predicted that Jesus would enter Jerusalem like a king, and that he would be sold for 30 pieces of silver. He foretold the smiting of the shepherd and the scattering of the sheep. He cried out, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding upon an ass." Likewise the Psalms foretell the tribulations of Christ. In Psalm 22, the singer puts it this way, "They pierced my hands and feet. I may tell all my bones. They look and stare upon me. They part my garments among them and cast lots upon my vestures." As the Old Testament predicted with vivid clarity the coming and the trials of Jesus, so did the record of the New Testament prophesy events to come long after the record was made. The 24th chapter of Matthew relates, "And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said unto them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down." 40 years later, when Titus took Jerusalem and the temple was burned, Titus became so angered, he ordered his soldiers to dig up the foundations of both the temple and the city. The prophecy of Jesus was fulfilled. There has been much speculation about Jesus' prophecy of the days of the end of the world. Some contend that the end may come in our own time of division and turmoil in atomic and hydrogen warfare. Others, however, point to the prophecies of the greatest prophet of the Middle Ages, Nostradamus. They agree, according to his predictions, the troublesome times are ahead of us from now to the year 2000. But Nostradamus' prophecies projected to the year 7000, and we may not yet witness what the disciple of Jesus called the end of the world. Jesus' prophecy, according to Matthew, is recorded in these words: "Take heed that no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet." The book of Revelation, with its mystical symbolism, has been interpreted innumerable times according to the state of mind, the religious background, and the desires of the interpreter. But time in its own way will reveal the full meaning of that book. Historians of the future, or even yet in our day, will evaluate the accuracy and portent of those words. The unfulfilled prophecies of old are the significant mysteries of the future. The two monuments of the ancient world which have inspired the most wonder and speculation are the Great Pyramid of Gizeh and the Sphinx near Cairo in Egypt. According to inscriptions found in it, the Great Pyramid was built by the pharaoh Cheiro, who ruled about 2600 BC. But according to a psychic research conducted by Cayce, the seer of Virginia Beach, Cheiro took credit for a work which preceded his rule by 10,000 years, and the Sphinx was already in existence when the Great Pyramid was constructed under the guidance of Rata, the high priest. Be this as it may, the Great Pyramid has been the puzzle of the ages, for it seems unlikely that such a gigantic structure should be built merely to satisfy the vanity of a pharaoh. When archaeologists at last found the cleverly concealed entrance on the north side of the pyramid, they discovered to their astonishment that neither one of the two passages led to the mummy of a pharaoh. D. Davidson and H. Aldersmith published in 1924 a monumental book entitled The Great Pyramid, Its Divine Message. In this fascinating scientific work, they proved in meticulous calculations and innumerable charts that the Great Pyramid was actually a monument of prophecy. Some of the events prophesied in the Great Pyramid are these. The First World War, August the 4th and 5th, 1914, falls at the end of the great step concluding the Grand Gallery. The armistice, November the 11th, 1918, reaches the end of the first low passage. The Great Depression, which ended in the stock market crash of 1929, is shown at the beginning of the second low passage. Adolf Hitler's decision for world conquest is indicated by the end of the second low passage. It is dated September the 15th and 16th, when Hitler had his first discussion with Mussolini and negotiated the Axis alliance in 1937. But the fathers of the American Revolution, the founders of the United States, were well aware of the symbolic meaning of the Great Pyramid, with its missing capstone, which they replaced with the mystical all-seeing eye. In Greece, about 1,500 years before the birth of Christ, temples of prophecy or oracles sprang up all over the land. Dodona, the earliest one, was old when Homer, the great poet, penned the immortal verses of his Iliad. But of the many oracles, it was Delphi which was destined to become the most celebrated of all. The Pythia sat in a sacred cave on an iron tripod which had been placed over a rock fissure, drawing her into a holy trance. In this trance state, she prophesied fame and fortune. She prophesied failure and disease. She foretold victory or defeat in military campaigns which shared the destiny of nations. Some of the prophecies were about everyday occurrences: the sex of a coming child, advice to the lovelorn, the outcome of the Olympic Games. Yet sages, kings, and heads of nations came to ask the famous oracle for advice, and when fortune favored them, they rewarded it richly. It was Cicero, the Roman philosopher, statesman, and critic, who wrote, Delphi could never have been so overwhelmed with significant presents from kings and nations had not the ages proved the truth of these oracles. Much of the Delphi's wealth came from King Croesus, the fabulously rich ruler of Lydia, whose fortune is legendary even today. Because Croesus was a cautious man, he put 6 different oracles to a test with this question: what is King Croesus doing today? When her turn came, the Pythia of Delphi replied, Croesus is boiling a lamb and a tortoise together in a copper vessel. This was true, and the king was highly pleased with the accuracy of the oracle. He then sent a large procession of courtiers and slaves bearing costly gifts to induce Apollo, the sun god and patron of the oracle, to grant him a special favor. Then Croesus asked, shall I march against King Cyrus of Persia? Apollo's answer was cryptic, for the Pythia replied, Croesus, if thou crossest the river Halys, thou shalt destroy a great kingdom. Croesus interpreted the response to mean that he would be victorious in his campaign against Cyrus, and he therefore declared war against Persia. But within 2 weeks, it was Cyrus who victoriously stormed Sardis, and Croesus was condemned to be publicly burned with his advisors. On the flaming funeral pyre, he could sadly meditate on the double meaning of the oracle. Once Pythia prophesied the destruction of the great Delphi itself. When the Pythia was asked about it, she declared in a mournful voice, aye, if he bear it, if he endure to know, even Delphi, like all things, must go. Thus, even thus, on some long-destined day, shall Delphi's beauty shrivel and burn away. Delphi's fame shall vanish, and from the earth expire at that bright bidding of the celestial fire. And as Apollo's priestess prophesied, the day soon came. By the 1st century AD, the Delphi had become so famous and wealthy that the Roman Emperor Nero became jealous of its importance, and he looted and destroyed it. Nero felt secure, for the Pythia had told, beware of 73. But the prophecy applied to his successor, Galba, who had Nero strangled. It was Galba who ruled in his 73rd year. The world has had many oracles, prophets, magicians, and soothsayers. Anwari predicted a great storm for September the 16th, 1186 AD. The storm never materialized, but on that night, Genghis Khan was born. This Mongol leader swept over kingdoms and nations like a formidable storm, leaving in his wake death and destruction. In the Middle Ages, from the year 900 AD up to 1200 AD, the people were so convinced of the end of the world happening in the near future that they neglected to repair their houses and till their fields. The year 999 AD was the date most prophets agreed upon for this calamity to happen, and a trek to Jerusalem was believed necessary for one's salvation. The people sold and left their homes by hundreds and migrated to the Holy Land. As late as the 16th century, Johann Stoffer predicted another flood, as in the time of Noah. The people fled to the high places and spent their time and savings in the building of innumerable covered boats like Noah's Ark. The hills and mountains were dotted with them, and all the ark builders hurried to finish their boats before the great rains would surprise them. In the year 1517 AD, a barefoot hermit roamed through the streets of Rome, crying his prophecy of doom and destruction. His name was Bartolomeo Brandano, and he shouted to the populace, woe to Rome! Woe to Rome! The city of destruction will fall to the Transalpine nations for the sins of the Pope and the prelates. Pope Clement VIII had the hermit clapped into irons and warned with dire measures if he would not desist from his shouting. Brandano was released, but as he continued prophesying the fall of Rome, the Pope had him thrown into the Tiber, hoping he would drown. When the hermit survived this ordeal miraculously, he was thrown back into the dungeon and chained. 10 years later, the mercenary army of Charles V swept through Italy and sacked Rome in a bloody pillage. The hermit was released by the conquerors, and Pope Clement VIII was forced to sign a humiliating peace treaty and had time to meditate on the fulfillment of Brandano's prophecy. There was another monk, Savonarola, who predicted the expulsion of the Medicis, the ruling family from Florence. He predicted the sack of Rome and the French invasion of Italy under Charles VIII. But the Vatican in Rome had long been beleaguered by disgruntled nobles from prelates, and as Savonarola preached openly against the crimes of the Borgias, Pope Alexander, the father of Cesare and Lucrezia Borgia, who were guilty of many a political murder, would not allow Savonarola to flay his offspring in public sermons. The Pope declared Savonarola a heretic, and when the fearless monk declared that he was ready to be tested by any ordeal the church would choose, the Pope obliged him to prove his innocence through the ordeal of fire. Astrology has a history of thousands of years, from the time of Nebuchadnezzar, Pythagoras, Nero, and Nostradamus, down to our 20th century. Even some of the popes were astrologers. Leo X became a great patron of astrology, because an astrologer had predicted his election to the papal chair when he was only a child. When the disease of the Archbishop of St. Andrew baffled London's physicians, he went to Paris, where it was diagnosed and cured, thanks to the horoscope of a French astrologer. His name was Jérôme Cardin, but in parting, he warned the Archbishop, "Your Eminence, I have been able to cure your disease, but I cannot prevent your destiny of being hanged." The astrologer's prophecy was fulfilled 20 years later, when the Archbishop was hanged by an edict of Mary Queen of Scotland. The Swedish astronomer Tycho Brahe was only a young man when he predicted the Great Plague which depopulated Europe in 1666. He also predicted the birth and death of Gustavus Adolphus, the warrior king of Sweden, who kept Europe in fear and turmoil in the 30-year religious war. Gustavus Adolphus died in the bloody Battle of Lutzen. The world-renowned French astrologer and prophet, Nostradamus, predicted more than 100 years before it happened the destructive fire of London, which occurred in 1666. This event was also foretold by England's mother, Shipton, in the jingle, "Wind and fire well nigh mix" in 1666. Much be burned in fiery shower in London town, up to the tower. So you can see prophecy is found to have many facets. Astrology, the voices heard by the biblical prophets, and Joan of Arc, and Britain's mother Shipton. Joan of Arc, a simple peasant girl from Domremy, was probably the most amazing example of prophecy fulfilled. In childlike simplicity, she prophesied that she was destined to rid France of the English invaders and crown the Dauphin in Reims, and as Joan predicted, through her leadership, the English invaders were driven back, and the Dauphin was crowned King of France in the great cathedral of Reims. For these amazing deeds, she was delivered to her enemies, declared a witch, and burned at the stake. There was another saint, St. Malachi of Ireland, who predicted the number of popes who were to ascend the papal chair. Pope Celestine III, for one, was identified with the Latin words de Rori Bovensi, which means that his family name was Bovensi. Pope Alexander IV was described with the words Signum Ostiensi, and he was, before his election, Cardinal of Ostia. Pope Clement VIII had been governor of Rieti in Umbria. St. Malachi referred to him as Rose Umbria, the Rose of Umbria. Pope Clement VI was identified Urus Velox, and his family coat of arms showed a running bear. Many more could be added to this impressive list, but scholars have speculated that only 7 cardinals remain to ascend the papal chair until the last pope, Peter the Roman, appears. About him, St. Malachi prophesies, "During the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, Peter the Roman will lead his flock through great tribulations. The city of the 7 hills will be destroyed, and the awesome judge will judge the nations." Mother Shipton, born in Yorkshire, England, in 1488, was described by her biographer Baker. Her stature was larger than common, her body crooked, her face frightful, but her understanding extraordinary. Her fame lies in the prediction she made concerning Cardinal Wolsey, who was making plans to move his headquarters to York. When the Cardinal heard that the Yorkshire Series had prophesied that he could never see York, he sent 3 distinguished emissaries to Mother Shipton to discover whether she had really made such a prediction. He swore that he would burn her if it were true. When the emissaries faced her with the question, Mother Shipton replied, "He may see it, but he will never get there." And to their amazement, then she prophesied accurately the fate of the 3 noblemen. When the cardinal was told of Mother Shipton's corrected prediction, he was in the council tower of Cawood, where he could see York in the distance. In fury, he vowed that he would burn the witch. But he did not burn her and did not get to York. He died on the way. There are many prophetic jingles attributed to this 15th century Mother Shipton of Yorkshire. One ancient doggerel declares in rhyme, "Carriages without horses shall go, and accidents fill the world with woe. Around the world thoughts shall fly, in the twinkling of an eye. The world upside down shall be, and gold be found at the root of a tree. Through hills men shall ride, and no horses be at their side. Under water men shall walk, shall ride, shall sleep, shall talk. In the air men shall be seen in white, in black, and green. Iron in the water shall float, as easily as a wooden boat. Gold shall be found and shown in a land that's not now known." Here one recognizes an incredible list of fulfilled predictions, verified in this scientific age of the 20th century. Emanuel Swedenborg, the Swedish visionary, abandoned his profession to startle the world with his mystical books about heaven and hell, and also his extraordinary clairvoyance. Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, lived in Persia in the 19th century. He made the prophecy that his faith would one day circle the world. The great mystic Count Saint-Germain was the advisor of rulers and the darling of Europe's society in the 18th century. The American Indian prophets resembled the great prophets of Israel in preaching a definite message. They foretold the regeneration of the red man and the recapture of the lands from the white man. Germany can boast of 2 seers who foretold future events with incredible accuracy. The first was a Saxon fisherman, Christian Herring, who predicted in 1744 that an army would invade Saxony, fighting a bloody battle, occupying Dresden, and leaving it soon through its upper gate. Some 2 years later, in the winter of 1745, the army of Frederick the Great fought the bloody battle of Saxony. He did occupy Dresden and left it through the upper gate soon after the peace was signed. Christian Herring also predicted an alliance between Maria Theresa of Austria and Louis XV of France against Frederick the Great, 2 months before the event came about. He foresaw the 7 Years' War a full 7 months before the fighting began. Another German prophet, Johann Adam Müller, made his home in Maisbach, near Heidelberg. Fully documented evidence has established that as early as 1807, Müller predicted the Franco-Russian War of 1812 and Napoleon's retreat from Moscow. In 1815, when everyone believed Napoleon to be safely put away on Elba, Müller was mocked and ridiculed when he foresaw another war with France. Nevertheless, Napoleon did flee back to France, and while the victors divided the spoils in the Congress of Vienna, he assembled a new army and marched against them until he was defeated in the fateful battle of Waterloo. The most recent prophecy about the First World War and its far-reaching effects was made by the Russian scholar Count Leo Tolstoy, the author of War and Peace and other great works. In 1910, when Tolstoy lay dying, he made an amazing prediction in an awed and halting whisper. "I see, floating above the sea of human fate, the nations rush madly after her. But she, the eternal courtesan, commercialism, flirts with them all. bewitching as she seems, much agony and destruction follow in her wake. She carries the flame of war from city to city and from country to country. The great conflagration set by the torch of war will start in 1913 in the southern countries of Europe. I see in that year all Europe in flames and bleeding, and I hear lamentations on the huge battlefields. And who knows, perhaps the German Kaiser did decide on a war in 1913, but waited only for a good excuse to start it. There's a modern prophet whose predictions have an amazing percentage of accuracy, although he made some of them merely through the study of the human hand. He is Count Hamann, who called himself Cheiro. Among his early predictions was that which he made for Lord Kitchener. When Kitchener was still an unknown colonel in the British Army, Cheiro told him, "You will someday head the British Army in its greatest war to come." Kitchener, you may recall, was made war minister at the outbreak of the First World War. Now, Cheiro then elaborated his prediction in declaring, "And you will die in a sea disaster in your 66th year." Lord Kitchener died when the battleship which was to bring him to Russia was torpedoed. Even though he had trained himself to become a good swimmer, he drowned in the turbulent waters of the North Sea in the year 1916. And he was in his 66th year. In order to test Cheiro's ability, Tsar Nicholas II approached the famous palm reader in the disguise of a private citizen. Cheiro told the Tsar, "You desire peace, but your destiny is tied up with bloody wars and turmoil, and you will lose what you love best through violence." A few years after the Russian-Japanese War, which ended so disastrously for Russia, Cheiro came to Moscow and Tsar Nicholas demanded to see him at his summer palace. Cheiro was asked to work out the Kabbalistic numbers of both the Tsar and the Tsarina, and he was stunned by the tragic death he foresaw for them both in 1917. When the monk Rasputin came to him for a reading, Cheiro told him that he would be killed by poison, a dagger, and bullets, and that his body would be thrown into the river Neva. Rasputin laughed and claimed to be indestructible. For it took all four methods: poison, dagger, bullets, and the icy waters of the river Neva to crush the life out of his tremendous body. In London, Cheiro was asked to read the palm of a veiled woman. He told her about a brilliant career and fame and fortune all over the continent, but an end of disaster and misfortune. The woman gasped, "Oh, mon Dieu!" And Cheiro gazed into the deep eyes of the immortal Sarah Bernhardt, Europe's greatest actress. In his long, eventful life, Cheiro read hundreds of palms of the great and near great. Among his famous clients were the beautiful Blanche Roosevelt, a gifted American girl who became Contessa Marchetta Delphi. Madame Melba, the great singer whose golden voice thrilled Europe and America. Lily Langtry, the famous actress who became the darling of America. And Mark Twain, the great American humorist who was bankrupt when he came for his reading. He wrote in Cheiro's guest book, "Cheiro has exposed my character to me with humiliating accuracy. I ought not to confess this accuracy. Still, I am moved to do it. Mark Twain." The most tragic and yet truthful prediction which Cheiro made was that which he saw in the palm of the famous English poet Oscar Wilde. After examining a pair of pudgy male hands, Cheiro declared, "The right hand is the hand of a king who sends himself into exile." "Ridiculous," exclaimed Lily Langtry. "Oscar is a genius and an aesthete." But after his unfortunate scandal, Oscar Wilde had to exile himself. He died in Paris, poor and lonely, shunned by his admirers and deserted by his society friends. Cheiro was no less amazing in his predictions of historical events. In 1927, for example, he declared that India would be freed and religious warfare would rage between the Mohammedans and the Buddhists. Cheiro further predicted that Italy and Germany would war with France and that Spain would be under a dictatorship. This came to pass with the alliance of Hitler and Mussolini, and General Franco did become dictator of Spain. He also foresaw that London and the east coast towns of England would be destroyed by Russian airplanes. He declared The great battle of Armageddon will be fought on the plains of Palestine between Russia and the new Jewish nation. Cheiro cited in 1927 a newspaper article, "Unfathomed Wealth of the Dead Sea and Palestine." The imagination reels before the stupendous figures of wealth, estimated by the experts to be the value of the deposits. Andrew Jackson Davis, one of the most amazing psychics, was born in America over 100 years ago. His accomplishments merit genuine respect. In 1845, he delivered over 150 lectures in a deep trance. He wrote numerous books, and in one called The Penetralia, he made these astonishing predictions. There will be a great improvement of motive forces, a method of traveling on dry land and through the air. Instead of the present gallery-looking cars, we will have spacious salons, almost portable dwellings, moving with such speed, and perhaps there will be advertisements through to California in 4 days. Look out in these days for carriages and traveling salons moving on the roads without horses, steam, or visible motive power, moving with greater speed and safety than at present. They will be moved by a strange and simple mixture of aquatic and atmospheric gases, and so imparted by a machine somewhat resembling our engines as to be entirely concealed and manageable between the forward wheels. The first requisite for these land locomotives will be good roads upon which your engine without horses may travel with great rapidity. Remember that Andrew Jackson Davis predicted all this in 1856. Brigham Young, the dauntless leader who headed the Mormon trek to the Salt Lakes to keep them safe from persecution, made this following prophecy for the world and America. All that you know now can scarcely be called a preface to the sermon that will be preached with fire and sword, tempests, earthquakes, hail, rain, and fearful destruction. You will hear of magnificent cities, idolized by the people, sinking in the earth, entombing the inhabitants. The sea will heave beyond its bounds, engulfing mighty cities. Famine will spread over the nations. They will destroy each other, caring not for the blood and lives of their neighbors, of their families, nor their own lives. Those dire words of Brigham Young seem to have a parallel in the prediction made by Edward Cayce, the miracle man of Virginia Beach. This amazing man, who diagnosed the ailments of hundreds of people while in a self-induced trance, offered a prediction about the coming changes in the earth. His forecast presages events from the present to the year 2000 and includes a great cataclysm caused by a flip of the Earth's axis. Italy, Japan, and England will sink, and later the whole of Europe in the twinkling of an eye. At the same time, new land masses are to rise from both the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans. As for America, the Cayce reading, or prophecy, predicts that California will be separated from the mainland and broken up into islands, while the lowlands and parts of the desert will be covered by the ocean. The Great Lakes are to form a large gulf in the Atlantic, while new land is to rise near Florida, and the mountain range is to be pushed up in the Midwestern states. Such geographical phenomena are not beyond the realm of reason. Geological researchers speculate that the increasing weight of this ice mass at the South Pole could cause the Earth's axis to tilt, thereby causing a cataclysm of earthquakes and tidal waves. And so Brigham Young's and Edgar Cayce's predictions may well come to pass. For those who wish to check the Bible for a confirmation, they will find confirmed in the 24th chapter of St. Matthew, wherein Jesus also predicts these calamities. There is one book in the Christian Bible known as the Apocalypse, or the Revelations of St. John. Many biblical scholars have tried to interpret the book of Revelations and give its prophecy a time tag. Various interpretations have been applied to the symbols of the four churches, the 7 golden candlesticks, the 7 seals and their opening, revealing the white, the red, the black, and the pale horse, those slain for their faith, and the end of the world with the heavens rolled up like a scroll. But perhaps no one except a prophet of the saintliness and insight of a St. John can interpret that which has been couched in this terrifying symbolism. The prophecies of coming cataclysm and worldwide destruction seem like the frightening visions of a mad brain. But strange as it may seem, both ancient and modern prophets have made similar predictions. There was Ezekiel, who worried his contemporaries, and Zechariah, who made his predictions 100 years later. And in the story of Gog, we are told that he is to come like a cloud of locusts to ravage the land of the children of Israel. Zechariah predicted in the final book of the Old Testament the storming of Jerusalem and the battle of all nations. From this 16th century study where I'm now seated, the following predictions and many more were made over 400 years ago by the French physician who attended royalty, fought the plague successfully, yet who rose to his greatest fame as a prophet. Michael Nostradamus was born the 14th day of December, 1503 in Saint-Rémy. He was an exceedingly bright youngster. His paternal grandfather, Jean de Saint-Rémy, taught him Greek, Latin, Hebrew, and the mysteries of alchemy, the Kabbalah, and astrology. After studying the plague in Avignon, he developed his own methods of diagnosis and quickly gained confidence and fame through his plague powder, which saved many whom other doctors had given up. But with his fame came professional jealousies, and he was forced to sit for most grueling examinations. In spite of all the obstacles and objections from his older colleagues, Nostradamus passed the examination with ease and became a fully accredited doctor at the age of 26. In the beautiful town of Agen, Nostradamus settled down and married Harriet de Lubjac, who gave him 2 fine sons. It was then the tragedy struck. The plague took his wife and sons, and he became an eternal searcher and wanderer. In his wanderings from town to town and in search for wisdom in monasteries and the thick-walled studies of astrologers, alchemists, and the sages of his time, he asked himself perplexing questions. Why was he unable to save his own wife and his sons when he had saved other wives and other children with his plague powder? Was there a fate which decreed when man must join his forebears in their graves? Did the Creator determine the life path leading either to happiness or tragedy? Was all this decided before the birth of the child, written in God's awesome book of life? And how could he, Nostradamus, gain the wisdom to read the Kabbalistic signs which would reveal the future? All these questions and many others led Michael Nostradamus to an intensive study of eternity's time clock, the constellations. He delved into astrology, alchemy, magic, and other secret sciences, hidden in musty volumes, in puzzling symbols and Kabbalistic formulae. As he searched, a lightning bolt of inspiration struck. Nostradamus found a way to look into the magic mirror of time, where he was unable to watch the astounding parade of events to come. In that awesome instant, Nostradamus had gained God's gift of prophecy. And out of a troubled physician grew a man who was able to read and understand the Creator's book of life. It was no wonder that Henry III and his queen, Catherine de' Medici, became the patrons of this amazing physician, who could not only heal their ailments, but who could also look into the future and predict thrones for all 4 of their sons. That unforgettable night when Nostradamus conjured the angel Anel to show Catherine de' Medici the future of her sons in the magic mirror, she saw each one of them ascending a throne. But neither the mirror nor Nostradamus revealed to her that each would die to leave the throne to his successor. His prophecy about the death of Henry II was only understood after it happened in a tournament. Nostradamus had predicted in one of his amazing 4-line prophetic poems, quote, "The young lion shall overcome the old one in a tournament field in a strange duel. In a golden cage he shall put out his eye. 2 wounds. One causes him to die a cruel death." In a tournament with a Scottish knight, a splinter entered the golden visor of Henry II and pierced first his eye and then his brain. And so the old lion really died a painful and cruel death. When a series of his famous quatrains was fulfilled in amazingly accurate circumstances, Catherine de' Medici consulted the magic mirror of Nostradamus often. Catherine's death was another of Nostradamus's rhyming riddles. The lady will remain to rule alone. The unique one died on the field of honor. 7 years she will vent her grief. Then she shall have a long life and a glorious reign. Nostradamus used a brass bowl filled with magnetized water when he searched for the coming future of France and the events which would change the rule of dynasties and nations, which he recorded in his collection of prophetic poems appropriately called The Centuries. He prophesied 100 years ahead of his time the date when the beloved Dauphin would marry Maria Theresa of Spain and ascend the throne. He also foretold the reign of the Sun King, Louis XIV, called the Grand Monarch. The time, a character and death of Louis XVI, and the influence of Marie Antoinette are described in 2 quatrains. The times are too good and the king is too easygoing. In negligence he makes and unmakes hasty decisions. Lightly he overlooks the faults of his loyal spouse. He will be put to death through his benevolence. And the seer continues. Because a Bourbon is too good and carries in his hand the signs of justice, his blood and the blood of all those who carry his name, after an unjust flight, shall receive their due, in spite of his plea. In the beginning of the revolt, which grew into the French Revolution, Louis XVI fled with Marie Antoinette and his children. All were executed in spite of the king's pleas for mercy. This prophet's predictions reached even the 20th century when he penned these lines which are said to have portended the abdication of Edward VIII when he chose between the throne and Mrs. Wallis Simpson. The young man born to the kingdom of Britain, whom his dying father shall recommend, shall give London a topic after his death, and it shall demand the kingdom from his son. The rise of Hitler is easily recognizable in another verse. From the depths of Occidental Europe, a child will be born of poor people. He will seduce the masses through his tongue, and his reputation will increase and reach the Orient. Adolf Hitler was born of poor parents in the depth of Europe, Austria. He did seduce the masses with his speeches about Germany's destiny, and his fame did reach and impress Japan and the Orient. Looking far into the future, far beyond our own time, Nostradamus made a long series of terrible predictions concerning Rome, the clergy of the Catholic Church, and the flight of the Pope. Among the most thought-provoking of those yet-to-come projections are these. Ruin will come to the Italians and terrible fear. Their great city, a victim of corruption, will be looted. Day and night, and her churches will be violated. The 2 rivers, the Tiber and the Po, will be red and flowing with blood. When the Vatican will be pillaged, the sacred things profaned, the greatest one shall be at the Rome. Among the populace, a pestilence will be born. A king shall do something unjust, but he shall not be condemned. For Paris, Nostradamus prophesies. All around the great city, soldiers will be lodged in fields and towns. They will attack Paris, incited by Rome, and on the bridge, a great pillage will be made. Just as the biblical prophet Ezekiel and the modern prophet Cheiro predicted the return of the Jews to Palestine and the great battle of Armageddon, followed by hunger and pestilence, so did Nostradamus predict in this stanza, the newcomers will occupy a place which was formerly inhabitable. They will build homes without defenses and inhabit towns and fields and meadows at their pleasure. But war, famine, and pestilence will make their fields unproductive for quite some time. In several of his quatrains, Nostradamus predicts an Arab invasion of Europe. The Oriental shall come out of his seat, shall pass over the Apennines mountains and see France, shall go over the air, the waters, and the snow, and shall strike everyone with his staff. Through the discord and negligence of the French, a passage shall be opened to Mahomet. The land and sea of Italy shall be bloody, and the harbor of Marseille shall be covered with sails and ships. Russia's invasion of Turkey, her taking over the Greek islands and London's sphere of invasion, is indicated in this quatrain. The endeavors of the north shall be great. Upon the ocean gate, Dardanelles shall be opened. The kingdom in the island shall be re-established, and London shall quake in fear of discovered sails. Nostradamus, we now realize, predicted the bombing of London as accurately as the German World War II bombs hit their targets. The dart of heaven shall make his circuit. Rockets will strike. Some shall die speaking, so unexpected. It will be a great execution. Like a stone crashing through a tree, so shall the fierce people be humbled. Through the noise of a human monster, atom bombs, shall come the purge and expiation. A frightening quatrain indicating the sinking of entire countries seems to have a parallel in the predictions of the coming earth changes made by a modern prophet, Edgar Cayce. Nostradamus states it like this: a great mountain encompasses 7 stadia. After peace, war, famine, and inundation, it shall roll a long way, sinking many countries, even long-established kingdoms and their great foundations. In another quatrain, Nostradamus describes Napoleon as tétrasé, which means the shaved head. This was an apt description. The French kings had all long hair. Napoleon was the first French ruler to wear his short. Another fateful ruler, the German Emperor Wilhelm II, was described by Nostradamus as the peacock with the short arm. William II was probably one of the vainest rulers, and he loved to hide his short left arm in a Napoleonic gesture in his vest. It is said that the German emperor trembled over an ancient prediction which declared Wilhelm II, by name, will be the last king of Prussia. The Cayce had good reason to tremble, since his grandfather had been told that the Hohenzollern Empire would end in 1914. One almost shudders at the uncanny accuracy with which Nostradamus described the First World War some 400 years before the German invasion of Belgium. He foresaw the next 20 years between world wars as he wrote of von Hindenburg's death, Hitler's assumption of power, and his rise to fanatic dictatorship. The fall of Czechoslovakia, Poland, and France, and the occupation of Paris, Nostradamus predicts in these magnificent lines: in the city which the wolf shall enter, enemies shall be all around. A foreign force shall lay waste great lands. To the walls and the Alps, friends shall go. And so it happened, you recall. All those who were friendly to France either stood up against a wall to be shot or managed to flee to Switzerland, the neutral, Alpine country. Hitler's pompous ally, Mussolini, and his failing fascist regime were aptly described by Nostradamus. Also, Hitler's own ignominious end was graphically predicted. Buried not dead, but in an apoplectic fit, he will be found to have eaten his hands. The city shall damn the heretic. Whatever the laws were, he had them changed. Yes, we can easily imagine the fallen Hitler in the cellar of the bombed-out chancellery, chewing his fingernails in an apoplectic fit. Now let us turn to prophecies about America and see what Nostradamus has to say about it. The elder sister of the British Isles will be born 15 years before her brother. By virtue of her destiny, which is truthfully so, she will succeed to the rule of justice. The elder sister, America, was born in 1776, 15 years before her brother, Canada, gained autonomy sanctioned by the British Parliament and the Canadians. In the next quatrain, Nostradamus coined the word Amerisch, 250 years before America came into being. He declared the head of London with the ruler of Amerisch when the island of Scotland will be covered with ice. Both king and rebel will be against a false antichrist who will put them all into war. This happened in December 1941, shortly after Pearl Harbor, when Hitler, the false antichrist, put both the King, England, and the former rebel, America, into the war. Roosevelt's appearance on the stage of history is predicted in this quatrain. Of the aquatic triplicity, England, France, and America, will be born one, who will make Thursday his holiday. His fame, praise, rule, and power shall grow across land and sea and worry the Orient. President Roosevelt declared a Thursday Thanksgiving Day a national holiday, and his increasing power did worry the Orient, Japan, after her attack on Pearl Harbor. Now, in the last quatrain, Nostradamus predicts the future of America. The earth and air will be filled with frozen water when they will come to honor Thursday. That which was never to be became so beautiful. From all four parts will they come to honor her. So the great seer prophesies that on another winter day, that which was never to be shall become so beautiful that from all the corners of the world, people will come to honor America. Of course, he was referring to liberty. When Edgar Cayce was asked what Earth would look like around the year 2000, he predicted great earthquakes, tidal waves, and earth changes for the entire world. In an attempt to explain prophetic vision, Cayce declared, "To the psychic persons, thoughts have form, color, and substance. They are released from the mind of man and gather in the higher realms like clouds. Each thought is attracted by its own kind, like birds of a feather flocking together. Thoughts of tenderness and love will rise and join their brother thoughts in a cloud of brilliance and beauty. The thoughts of anger and revenge will also rise and join other hate thoughts in a darkening and threatening cloud of foreboding." Franklin Delano Roosevelt stated, "There is nothing to fear but fear itself." In his 4 books of prophetic quatrains, Nostradamus predicted fearful times. 20 years of the reign of the moon having passed, 7,000 years another shall hold his monarchy. When the sun shall resume his days past, then is fulfilled and ends my prophecy. And the last quatrain describes this end graphically. For 40 years, the rainbow shall not appear. For 40 years, shall it be seen every day. The parched earth shall wax drier and drier, and then the great flood shall appear. But man has always survived on his hope for the future. He constantly imagines and plans a brighter tomorrow and hitches his wagon to a star. Great comfort is given us through hope and faith, in the belief that the future, the truth of tomorrow, can be changed through brighter thoughts and brighter deeds. Mankind can change prophecy. Our future could be peace and abundance for all nations, not war and destruction. Thus do we hold the fate of our world in our own hands. So let us bring those 1,000 years of peace, which have been prophesied, into a wonderful fulfillment.